Okay, I know that coffee is nearly here. Okay, is it, Porrick? About 20 minutes? A good half an hour. Okay, so we're just going to do one more session. Is that okay? And then we'll break for a proper coffee. Okay, so this session is energy, beauty, and skin health. And I suppose when we talk about energy, it's something that we can all identify with. You know, most of us want more energy. You know, most of us can identify with this. Maybe it's a Monday morning, or sometimes it's a Friday morning where we think, oh, thanks be to God, the weekend is nearly here, that I just don't have any more energy. And we seem to collapse then on the Friday evening onto the couch and recuperate, and get back then to full energy levels by the time Monday morning comes and work begins. But I suppose I just wanted to introduce this case study of Sharon, who, like the rest of us, you know, doesn't want chronic fatigue, but wanted to improve her concentration and her productivity at work so that she could get out of there faster and have more time in the evening and more energy in the evening to do her other extracurricular hobbies or whatever. But also she had a flexitarian diet. Now, I don't know if you know people who follow flexitarian diets. They're not really vegetarians, but flexitarianism is increasing too. So it's a little bit like that concept of meatless Monday being extended to meatless Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, maybe even Saturday. So that flexitarians will not be excluding all red meat and meat in general, but they will only have it very occasionally. And again, worldwide, we see this is a trend that's growing at the moment. So more plant-based proteins are becoming more popular and accessible now, even in salad bars on supermarket shelves around the country. We'll see more peas, beans and legumes and things like that occurring now. And certainly salad bars in supermarkets have really become much more interesting places to walk around in the last number of years. So in terms of, in terms of energy, there are no simple answers. Sure, they're not. I mean, it's difficult. You can't measure it. So you can't sort of say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how's your energy? There's no simple way of measuring it. But we have to understand, I suppose, there are lots of different causes. And to maybe try and think in terms of the person or the client in front of us, what is the most likely cause? Or how can I maybe advise this person in terms of their fatigue? And so fatigue can be caused by medical conditions like anemia or an underactive thyroid. It can also be caused by stress, depression, and other mental illness. So it's both physical and psychological. So these two parts of energy are really two sides of the same coin. You know, the mind and body are connected, and if we're exhausted psychologically, if we're under a lot of stress, that can absolutely impact on our physical energy levels, and vice versa. So there are lots of conditions like diabetes that can cause fatigue, arthritis, depression. One of the ones that I've highlighted here is hypothyroidism, because I see an increasing number of women in particular who have problems with their thyroid. And if your thyroid is sluggish or slow, then obviously your energy levels will be low and your metabolism low as well and slow. So we do, I suppose, need to try and ascertain a little bit more about that fatigue. Because obviously if there's a reason for Sharon's tiredness, if she's up every night on working, say on her computer till 3 o'clock in the morning, then that's an obvious reason for fatigue. It's not anything more sinister or whatever. But usually I suppose we need to understand that sometimes we could direct a client to have a blood test to confirm maybe the origins of that fatigue. It can sometimes be to do with digestive issues. So if the digestive tract isn't working well, that can lead to a sluggish feeling as well. And also poor digestion is linked to depression because we have the gut-brain axis as well. So there's two-way communication between these two. And certainly we know that the metabolites that are produced by the gut bacteria, when they're traveling in the blood to the brain, can affect our mood and also our susceptibility to certain types of disease like depression. So it's very interesting, the information and the research around this link at the moment. We're going to be reading more and more about it. But it's important, I suppose, to ask the patient, well, have they digestive symptoms as well as fatigue? You know, is the digestive tract working well? Because those would be issues that might alert you to the fact that maybe that's where they should be looking for the origins of their fatigue. So a full blood test is usually necessary, and I would usually always correct people or ask them to maybe have a GP visit to determine, you know, what their iron levels are, their B12 levels are, their folic acid, vitamin D, and their thyroid function is like. Because that's all really important. So if somebody has a low folate or a low iron, then they may be deficient, and that in itself is going to cause fatigue. So you can get anemia from each of the deficiencies here between iron, vitamin B12 and folate. So they're really important to follow up on. And you can see here that in terms of the population, the adult population, here are men and here are women. With the RDA at 10 micrograms, you can see that there are approximately 38.8% of women with inadequate intakes of iron in this particular study here. So I think, you know, it is certainly sometimes a micronutrient issue, and it's something that maybe with a bit of questioning you can determine and then supplement or have them follow up with their GP. So where does energy come from? Well, our energy comes from all foods. There's only one beverage I think of that doesn't provide energy, and that's water. There's no calories in water. But energy comes from calories. And our calories are found in proteins, carbohydrates, and fat, also in alcohol. And you can see here that fat provides twice as many calories as proteins or fats. So 1 gram of fat, 9 calories. 1 gram of either protein or carbohydrate, only 4 calories. So that's why there was a lot of emphasis on reducing fat, as well as getting the right fat profile. You know, in terms of our guidelines, we need to, as we said, eat more of the mono and the polys at the expense of the saturates and the hydrogenated trans fats. Alcohol obviously isn't important, but it is nevertheless, you know, definitely contributing to our calorie intake and sometimes to depletion of B vitamins in some excessive drinkers. So I suppose it is important to realize, okay, there's calories, and if somebody is eating very little, not eating enough, it may be that they need to have more regular snacks to prevent fatigue at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. But generally speaking, sometimes it can be an overuse of things like refined sugars. So if our diet is very, very processed, what you can have is a very quick energy boost, having eaten a chocolate bar, but only to be faced with a very fast decline. So we see quickly, very quickly, that energy slump. So, you know, highly refined sugar, and here it is, getting in, spiking the blood sugar, sometimes can leave you at a lower ebb than where you started, with that sort of craving for another sugary snack or drink. So this type of, I suppose, roller coaster effect is not very good for the insides of your blood vessels, and certainly a lot of these sugary foods have empty calories, so they're not going to have good quality carbs or proteins or fats found in association with them. We also know that too much sugar and added sugar, refined sugar, and processed diets in general can affect the microbiome, or what's growing in the large intestine, the colon. And just to remind you again, why is that significant? Well, the microbiome, it's very much thought, are part and parcel of our immune health. They're really important in our immune health, and we're going to be coming into that in more detail shortly. So other things that affect our energy levels, and I'm feeling a little bit of this at the moment, maybe a little, you know, using caffeine is a bit of a crutch. Anybody here do that? I'm not sure, but certainly, you know, if you have a desire for a cup of coffee every hour, that might be a bit of an indication that you're over-relying on that caffeine hit. And of course, caffeine it's very good when you use it properly in terms of improving your ability to concentrate and perform. It is a stimulant, so it works. But when we overuse it, again, the effects seem to be more short-lived, and not as effective over time. We don't get the same productivity if we overuse it. So we need more and more. We become more and more dependent, and then of course we end up having it too late in the afternoon, and it affects our sleep, which in turn affects our waistline, which in turn affects our picking and our snacking maybe the following day, and it's really not a good habit to get into. So I suppose the thing to do with caffeine is to use it appropriately and when you really need it. So when you need to pick yourself up, perform, it's a very good idea to have it at about 11 o'clock, but possibly not at 9 o'clock in the evening when you're trying to wind down. Moderate caffeine intake, 2 to 3 cups of coffee a day. But if you have hypertension, there's a restriction. We would really say to people who have a high blood pressure, and that kind of could be 1 in 2 of us over the age of 50. It's pretty close to 50% of the population now having a high blood pressure over 50. Caffeine and too much caffeine, not a good idea for those people. Likewise, pregnant women, not a good idea either. So we would restrict pregnant women to in and around 200 milligrams of caffeine per day, which is maybe just 2 maximum very kind of weak cups of coffee, not espressos or anything like that, double espressos. And gradual withdrawal obviously is best. So you can actually adapt again, you can withdraw, and you can get too used to using caffeine. It's a movable feast. As I mentioned, not eating enough is a thing that will zap us of energy, absolutely. So people who meal skip, and I often think of my hairdresser when I think of this, because she starts her day with a cup of coffee, great, and a fag. But then she doesn't stop for lunch. She'll continue to work right through the afternoon, and of course she's absolutely zapped by the time she gets off at 5, 6 or whatever in the evening time. And she often describes of herself as just, give me the food when she gets home, and I'm not really going to be very discriminative about what I eat, because she's so hungry and her energy levels are so low at that stage that she doesn't really make very good choices. She's a fabulous hairdresser, but she really needs to look at building a couple of breaks in for herself, in terms of looking after herself. But okay, so it's really important that we look at the pattern of eating as well, which will and may prevent fatigue. Iron is exceptionally important because it helps us to transport oxygen and release energy in every single cell in the body. Obviously, that will prevent chronic fatigue, but we need to make sure that we're having sources like green leafy vegetables and legumes like chickpeas and lentils and nuts, particularly if we're not going to eat the best source of iron, which is lean red meat. So for the vegetarians, they do have to work harder at getting iron, and they have to also try and absorb a little bit with the aid of vitamin C rich satsumas or peppers at the meal as an accompaniment to their plant source of iron. So you can still get enough iron as a vegetarian, you just have to work that little bit harder and make sure you've got the vitamins D there. The other thing is not to have tea and coffee along with a vegetarian meal, because the tannins can interfere with the iron absorption of that meal. So we wouldn't recommend that. And here you can see here that, you can see that the absorption of iron from the nuts here will be enhanced by the spinach, the vitamin C in the spinach. And vegetarian meals can be just as nutritious, as I said, when they're well balanced. So skin and hair nutrients, there are many of them, and there aren't really singular ones that are any better than the other. We need a myriad of essential vitamins and minerals for skin, hair and nails. Like, many of them have very important contributory roles to play in the maintenance of normal skin, hair and nails throughout our life. So we will see issues with people who are, again, on very restrictive diets or who are avoiding food groups that may not be getting enough essential nutrition. Their skin and nails may suffer, and sometimes you'll see the telltale signs. It's probable that the complex matrix of constituents in food, rather than a high intake of any one particular vitamin or mineral, is going to be more beneficial for your skin, hair and nails. So it's really the matrix, it's the package. It's how Mother Nature, I suppose, is so good at providing us with the correct nutrition that we need to think of first. where are the nutrients in the food as opposed to supplying them all in a supplement form. So things like nuts, olive oil, spices like turmeric and ginger, berries like blueberries and raspberries, all of these types of foods that are found in the traditional Mediterranean diet are now sort of coming to the fore as being anti-inflammatory foods. You know, foods that are good to keep the skin health well in particular. And you'll read an awful lot now of articles. It's not so much immune health foods anymore, it's the anti-inflammatory foods that we can eat. And yes, the berries are brilliant anti-inflammatory foods, as is the oily fish. So again, it's coming back to the pattern of eating. You know, if you've got a broad range of foods, you're going to be probably doing as much for your skin, hair, nails as possible in terms of nutrition. Skin quality tends to refer to the skin parameters such as tightness, moisture content, and clearness from acne. So that's a little bit different in that, you know, there are issues there maybe that you might need and you could help with in terms of supplements. So I suppose it's about accessing what your customer wants, trying to decipher a little bit about their diet and their usual skincare routine, and then advise from there. I've put in this presentation just a number of, here on this side, macronutrients or micronutrients, so the vitamins and minerals, and in here EFSA approved claims. Now EFSA is the European Food Safety Authority, so basically they have looked at the science, they have agreed these types of claims that can be made on foods and supplements. So if your, say, orange juice contains or is supplemented with biotin, then you could put on the label, biotin contributes to the maintenance of normal hair. It also contributes to the maintenance of normal skin. It's a little bit stiff, isn't it? You're not meant to be really dressing these claims up and making them flowery and, you know, talking about glossy locks and things like that. But many marketers do that, you know, and they want to dress these claims up a little bit more. But EFSA have really urged food manufacturers, and I'm sure food supplement producers as well, to stick to the claims as they are. This is the claim. Try not to reword them as much as possible. But you can see here that nearly everything you can think of has a role in terms of the proper maintenance of your skin, hair and nails. And over here I've listed the foods that are particularly useful sources of these nutrients. So for example, iodine is not one we think of, but actually some people may be low or deficient in iodine in the population. It contributes to the maintenance of normal skin. And sources include things like mushroom, onions, tomatoes, strawberries, bananas and dairy. And actually dairy is a very good source of iodine. So people who don't eat dairy, who probably, you know, are not great fruit and veg eaters either, they can be pretty low in iron. We do have some, sorry, not in iron, but in iodine. Iodine is usually added to table salt, iodized table salt, but again, because we are encouraging people not to use salt, that might be a problem for some. So you can see everything from selenium to vitamin A, C and E, these antioxidants in particular, really, really useful for the normal collagen formation, normal function of things like gums, teeth and skin. You know, vitamin E contributes to the protection of cells from oxidative stress. So all of these particularly useful in the maintenance of the beauty outside. Dehydration again can leave us very, very fatigued. And we know this, you know, if we're trying to maybe compete in terms of training or exercise. You know, somebody who isn't fully hydrated starting off that exercise or training regime is going to fatigue faster. But even slight dehydration can leave you tired and sluggish. And this is a problem, I suppose, in offices where we're not accessing water or a water cooler or having a break for a cup of tea frequently enough. It will lead to delayed reaction time, foggy thinking, and sometimes things like constipation, where maybe a probiotic could help, but generally speaking, what you really want to do is advise the person in front of you to make sure that they're having that water as well in terms of their intake. It's hard to know how much, because everybody's different in terms of their size, their gender, their activity levels, their muscle mass. So we all have slightly different needs, but somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5 litres a day for men and women is sufficient. If you are exercising excessively, obviously you need to eat more or drink more. And the easiest way to tell whether you're hydrated or not is to look into the toilet bowl. And when you look at the colour of your wee, sorry to be so graphic, if it's a very strong colour, then you're probably not adequately hydrated. If it's very weak in colour, then it's a pretty good indication that you're fine. You know, I wouldn't worry about it or be too formulaic about it and get too stressed if you're not consuming 2 litres of water a day, because some slight women won't really need that at all, whereas some tall young men will need much more. So it does actually, though, impact on our performance, as you can see. And we do see this not just on the playing pitch, but we see it in terms of work as well. You know, people feeling, you know, really sluggish, really tired, and not, you know, not performing optimally. And it's really a matter of stopping and having, you know, the right type of beverage, not this, obviously. You know, obviously we know that alcohol in moderation, great, you know, but too much of it can sap us of energy, and it does obviously cause problems with B vitamins as well. So we need to supplement if somebody is overusing maybe or over relying on alcohol. The safe limits are there. For a woman, 11 standard drinks, and for men, 17 standard drinks. That's slightly different recommendation from what you might have heard, 14 units a week, but they've just redefined the measurement there. So a standard drink is a half a pint of beer, or a very small glass of wine, ladies, really small. It's about 125 mils. So it's very small. It's pretty easy to if you've a great social life, it's pretty easy to be drinking over that level, you know. And I think every now and then it's good to reflect and just think, oh, you know, what is the pattern become? Because without any kind of reflection, there's no conscious then need to change. So just getting back to Sharon then, what about this fatigue? In terms of, you know, her needs, she wants more concentration. She wants maybe to improve her skin and hair. They're a bit dull, lifeless, limpy. And she does have a flexitarian diet. So what sort of questions might you ask her, or might you engage her in to determine how the best way to steer her would be? Yeah, absolutely. I think I've heard it there, and I think I can move now because we're finished doing that bit. So yes, iron, a blood test, that would be a really good idea, you know, to advise her or ask her, has she had